If you like this video, please press the subscribe button to subscribe to this channel, and also give it a thumbs up. One of the biggest claims used by evolutionists against creationists is that we do not do real science. Now, there are some for whom the quality of the research and presentations of evidence are poor, but it is unfair to judge all creationists by this standard. If you take any group of people engaged in an activity, you will find some who do that activity well and some who do not. The same goes for creationists. There are those of us who seek to do science as well as possible, and then there are those whose research is of low quality. Evolutionists' ultimate approach is to define science in terms of naturalism so as to exclude creationists by definition. One approach by which creationists do scientific research is to look at the Bible and use its contents to propose a theory that can be tested by future data. Another approach is to use existing data to form a testable theory that is consistent with the Bible. Unfortunately, when dealing with the past, there is always going to be some conclusions based on existing data that may not be testable simply because we do not have access to the past. The best examples of creation science in action have been cases of starting with the Bible and developing theories that can make testable predictions. There are several that have made successful predictions. Catastrophic plate tectonics has made multiple successful predictions. They include undifferentiated globs of material within the Earth's mantle, as well as more water than is on the surface of the Earth within the Earth's mantle. Dynamic decay theory of planetary magnetic fields is a creationist theory that has produced many testable predictions. The theory starts out with God creating each planet, star, moon, and other body out of water and allotting the water molecules to produce a magnetic field. This magnetic field then decays based on the property of the planet. However, in the case of the Earth, it was disrupted by the effects of the Genesis flood, as shown here. This shows the decay of the Earth's magnetic field, not just the change in its field strength. Note the sudden drop during the Genesis flood due to the rapid fluctuations that would have occurred at this time. Here's a chart showing what this theory says the maximum magnetic field for each of these bodies should be, compared to what they actually are. Note that each of them is within the range predicted by the theory, and that Jupiter sits right at the maximum. That said, this theory also accurately predicted the magnetic fields of Uranus and Neptune, despite the fact that dynamo theory did not get the magnetic field of Uranus correct. It also has predicted the change in Mercury's magnetic field that has been observed between Mariner and Messenger. This theory also easily explains the unusual angle and position of the magnetic fields of Uranus and Neptune, something that cannot be explained by dynamo theory. These are zircon crystals. Zircon crystals are small crystals found in granite, and they contain uranium. Now, as uranium-238 decays into lead-206, it produces 8 helium atoms. Now, because helium is quite slippery, over time, it diffuses out of the zircon crystals. Dr. Russell Humphreys created 2 models for the helium diffusion rates. The first was based on an Earth that was 6,000 years old, having experienced 1 or more periods of accelerating nuclear decay. The second dated the zircons to their 1.5 billion year old radiometric date. When the measurements were made, the results fit the creation model perfectly, with absolutely no room for the old Earth model. Now, efforts have been made to explain this away, but none have successfully explained how the results were such a perfect fit. The genetic evidence that all living human beings have single common ancestors of both male and female was a surprise to evolutionists, but it is actually predicted by biblical creation. Evolutionists have calculated an age of hundreds of thousands of years by assuming we have a common ancestor with chimpanzees. However, that is not what direct measurements show. Measuring the rate of change by comparing people with known common ancestry actually fits the biblical account. That would be about 6,000 years for Eve and about 4,500 years for Noah. There is also the situation of re-evaluating data that is accepted by mainstream science to see how the actual data fits into a creationist perspective as a theory that makes testable predictions. An example of this that has produced successfully tested predictions is the Catastrophic model of Martian geology. This model includes an impact on the Helium impact basin being a trigger of the large volcanoes on exactly the opposite side of the planet. There are also examples of data that are generally ignored by mainstream science but are still of high enough quality that evolutionists have to be in a state of denial to argue against them. Sometimes such that it usually ends up being explained away in some manner. Furthermore, once such an explanation has been invented, it becomes repeated as if true, even if it has been thoroughly refuted. Among these are unfossilized dinosaur soft tissue, including red blood cells and blood vessels. It is actually amazing for these structures to have remained intact a few thousand years, let alone tens of millions of years. They cannot be summarily dismissed because they were discovered by mainstream paleontologists. Attempts to explain the preservation of this tissue are good enough to help it last a few thousand years, but not millions or tens of millions of years. In each of these cases, excuses are invented to try to make them fit old Earth models, but they are ignored as much as possible. Unfortunately, there are also hoaxes that can be easy to fall for, even if you are trying to be careful. In such cases, we need to be scientific about things by including it as only possible evidence, while not summarily dismissing it. The best way to handle it is to make its existence known, but cautiously. Also, in such cases, there needs to be a willingness to admit to being wrong when sufficient evidence is presented to falsify a particular conclusion. This should be the case for any area of science. Part of the problem is an unwillingness of establishment science to investigate evidence contrary to the old Earth common descent evolutionary story in an honest manner. In conclusion, creation scientists do real science, but we are often hampered by funding and the possibility of hoaxes from external material. Unfortunately, mainstream sources are too quick to dismiss as hoaxes anything that goes against the Big Bang to Man story. Consequently, proper research is seldom done, making it hard to get at the truth of such cases. However, we can develop theories based on the Bible that can be tested. We can develop theories based on existing data from a biblical perspective that can be tested. So consequently, creationists do real science.